She cries again. I'm throwing the book across the room. G'day, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I want to talk about this, The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan, the first book in the Empire of the Wolf series. I only bought this recently and finished it about a week or so ago. One of my patrons was going to read it and I thought, oh, this sounds right up my alley. And in fact, I actually have bought all books in the series. It's only a trilogy, I should mention. Now, this is a debut novel by the author, who is a lawyer. I think he is English, but he's now living in Australia. Another reason for me to buy the book and support a new author. All right, the things I'm going to cover in this review are the writing, the plot, the characters, the magical system, the world building, etc. When we're introduced to this world, the empire encompasses this land, which was disparate countries that have been conquered, basically. And under this empire, they are obliged to, of course, follow the laws of the empire, including a state-sanctioned religion. The main character is Conrad von Welt, a justice, who is part of the magistratum, I think, an organization or body which deals with learning about the law and sends out its justices to travel the land and decide any legal disputes. As we are told from the beginning, the common law is paramount. The main plot involves the discontent by many of these former countries against the empire and the age-old conflict between state and organized religion, the church, the state-sanctioned church. I was interrupted by my puppy. She's demanding that I play with her. All right, that to me seems to be the overall plot, but in the course of this book, there is also a mystery regarding a death. Basically, it becomes a murder mystery, which might also involve conspiracies regarding the fate of the empire itself. When we start the book, Justice Conrad and his clerk Helena and Bressinger, his, I don't know what he is, manservant, factotum, are traveling to the village of Rill. In company with them is a priest called Claver. And we actually get to see what a justice does. It comes to Conrad's attention that some of the villagers are not following the state-sanctioned religion, but the old pagan religions. And one of the laws of the land is that this is punishable. No surprise that this priest Claver, who we learn very quickly is a zealot, a young zealot, wants the maximum punishment, which I think might even include hanging. I can't recall now. But Conrad doesn't consider what they did requires that kind of punishment, and he metes out a more merciful judgment. But it gives us a glimpse as to what is required of the citizens of this conquered land and how the church, as compared to the judicial arm of the empire, deals with contraventions of the law. I should also mention that this world is reminiscent of medieval Europe with a Germanic influence, perhaps. As for the writing style, Richard Swan is a good writer. He has a great grasp of language. I found some sense quite evocative, but there were times when he would include more modern terms which seemed incongruous, which didn't quite fit the narrative flow. But overall, He writes well enough to convey his meaning. I didn't find that there was a lot of bloat. If anything, I would have liked a little bit more description of the world that he's created. I should also point out that I found the author's narrative choice a little strange. He chose to use Helena, Conrad's clerk, as his narrator, and the book is written in the first person by a much, much older Helena, who we know, of course, then has survived all the events that she is relating to us. Given that the story seems to be about Conrad, he's the one on the cover, not Helena, I found this narrative choice strange. I thought, why choose his clerk to convey this story? It has been done before, where we get to view our main character through the eyes of someone else, but her voice, I'll get into Helena as a character a little bit later on when I talk about the characters. The magic in this world seems to be limited to a few of the skills that justices have, and they all vary apparently between justices. These skills, these magical abilities, are learned skills which have been written down over the ages and were originally, I believe, part of the church's writings, but are now in the hands of the magistratum, which is a source of conflict between the two arms of the empire, the judiciary and the church. I didn't find this world very compelling to read about. It seemed far too similar to medieval Europe and not original, not to me anyway. The justices were an interesting difference in that they are basically adjudicators of disputes, judges basically, traveling this world and having enormous power and respect, which they do. Their word is law, basically. The pacing, I thought at times, got a little slow, especially when we were in, I think it's Gallen Vale, this town where the justice was investigating a murder. I'll be honest, I thought this seems more like a murder mystery to me rather than an actual fantasy novel. Personally, I didn't like that part of it. I thought we spent way too much on this mystery, on investigating it, on all the detail associated with a criminal investigation. The characterizations. Obviously, because we are viewing all the characters through Helena's eyes, I don't think she is always reliable or accurate in her portrayal of the characters. Conrad, for example, we hear right at the beginning that he is extremely fastidious and holds a handkerchief dabbed in lavender to his nose. We also hear that he is a hypochondriac. And then on the other hand, we are told he is intimidating and formidable and dangerous. The two sides of him seemed a little incongruous to me. I felt like I was reading about different characters. And I had difficulty reconciling earlier things I'd learned about this character with what I was observing throughout the rest of the book. He was extremely honourable and heroic, had integrity, a strong moral centre. He was also inflexible and in some ways naive. Character of Claver. How he was portrayed in the latter part of the book did not again match how he was portrayed at the beginning. The other characters, I'll talk about Helena last, I think. Bressinger came across as muscle, and we are immediately given to believe that he has a tragic backstory that involves children. It became very obvious very quickly. But it takes us almost to the end of the book for Helena, our main character, who spends several years with these other characters to learn what that tragedy is. I found that very telling actually about the character of Helena. But Bressinger was someone I actually did like. I just think he needed a lot more fleshing out. The sheriff that we met at Gallen Vale, now I liked him. He was blunt and unapologetic. He did not suffer fools gladly, and he was very flawed, but also had integrity and courage, I think. I found him more interesting than most of the other characters. Helena. I loathed her. I will admit it. I absolutely despised this character. I could not stand her. I have so many issues with her portrayal. She tells us again and again and again that she grew up on the streets and was extremely tough and strong and intelligent. When she also tried to tell us that she was brave, I almost fell out of my chair laughing. I thought, are you kidding? I've seen nothing of any courage in this girl. I should tell you a bit more about her. She is 19 years old and she has been a clerk with Conrad now, I think, for 2 years, learning everything required to eventually lead her to becoming a justice herself. She has been living a much more pampered life, much more privileged life than she is used to. So she tells us. Yeah. Honestly, that is not the character that I was reading about. She came across as an extremely entitled and privileged child who has always had everything handed to her on a plate. I could not see any sign whatsoever of this tough street urchin in her behavior, in what she said throughout the book. She was whiny and complaining and entitled and extremely selfish. I found her impossible to like, especially because she cried at the drop of a hat. There was a point where I was sending messages to my friends saying, I cannot believe she's crying again. And then I'd read the next page and I'd be like, oh my God, now she's biting back tears. The very next page. It was like non-stop crying with this character. If this was meant to show me that she was a sensitive character, it failed. All it did was enrage me. Because on one hand, we are told she is tough. On the other, she falls apart at anything. Which one is it? If I had not been told that this character was so tough, perhaps then I could have accepted some of her foibles. All it did was result in me getting so bored with her internal monologue. I was sick and tired of hearing her whining and complaining throughout this book. But this was a major problem I had with this book. The inconsistent characterizations for our two major characters in particular. And this romantic attachment of hers. While that was insta-love, the author spent a bit of time on it, and yet I didn't feel it was a realistic romance. In the end, I decided it was included as a device to have some pathos in the book. Other criticisms I have of this book is that the mystery was far too dragged out. I did not find it interesting, actually. I got bored with it. I wanted to learn more about the world, and I wanted to know more about the overall plot, which seemed to be this growing rebellion against the empire. And it seems we just touched on this rebellion when the book ended. Another criticism I have, and I need to point out that this probably stems from the fact that I practiced law for 17 years. So when I was reading about the common law in this book and all the maxims, or quotes at the beginning of each chapter. I was not impressed. It seemed to me like he took many of the precepts or maxims from English law and placed them in this book. I didn't see any originality there. I just thought, oh, come on, he's just changed a few words here. And this court case that takes place towards the end of the book, that also seemed to be taken straight out of court cases today. I have no problem with an author borrowing from their experience, but if you're going to place it in a fantasy setting, then really play around with it. Don't just put something that is easily recognizable from our own world. That does not make it interesting to me. I kept rolling my eyes every time I read some of these maxims. So perhaps for others who don't have a legal background, the inclusion of this paramount common law, the inclusion of these maxims, etc., is fascinating, interesting, I don't know. To me, it definitely wasn't. And that took a large part away from my enjoyment of this book. I kept thinking, oh, come on. Really? In summary, this book might appeal to certain readers. I can see it appealing because it seems different with the inclusion of the paramount importance of the common law, this view of a justice travelling around this land, deciding disputes. I can see that this might appeal to many readers. It didn't, however, appeal to me. And the major overall plot, which I believe is going to play out in the rest of the books, took a long time to get going in this. We spend far too much on the mystery and not enough on the overall plot. And Helena, her voice just grated on me so much that by the time I finished the book, I thought, I cannot bear to read about this character anymore because I cannot stand her. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that is my feeling about this character. Her constant complaining and crying just made her intolerable. But Conrad, however, is interesting to me, especially as we have this very moral character, very honourable character, who is starting to lose faith. Whilst part of me is interested to see whether Conrad's moral beliefs deteriorate in future books, I just don't think I can tolerate Helena's voice anymore. She is one of the most irritating characters I have read about in a long time. Do I recommend Justice of Kings? Now this is a tough one to answer. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you may not like it. You may not find Helena as annoying as I did. You may also really love this exploration of what it means to have a system of law in a world that is recovering from a war. You may be interested in seeing how this conflict between church and state is eventually resolved. But if you do not like whining teenagers, if you want more originality in a world, then perhaps this book won't be for you. Now, as I've mentioned, I own the other two books. I really don't want to read them, but I might give the second book a try and see what I think. This is the author's first book. Perhaps I will find Helena less irritating in the second. I'm not sure. And I do like to read books that I own. It'll teach me for buying all of them. I should have just bought the first and seen if I liked it. As for a score, I fluctuate on this. Sometimes I think I'm going to give it 4 out of 10, which means I will never read it again. And other times I think it deserves more, Just because I didn't personally like it doesn't mean it is a terrible book. So I think I'm going to give it 5 out of 10. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Now, of course, I want to hear if you have read The Justice of Kings and what you think of it. Did you like it? Did you love it? Do you think I was too harsh on it today? Which is always possible. Do you think I should read the other books? Or should I stop here? You know, I always want to hear your opinions. And you can let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you like this video, then you can do the usual. You can like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support me in that way. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.